All right, so sorry about that. This didn't have Zoom on it. Took me a minute to figure that out. Okay. So what I want to talk about today is crime scenes and specifically what? Yeah. Specifically kind of oriented toward, maybe it's better if I have it facing that way. Okay. Specifically, when we're talking about like sketching or trying to recreate the crime scene, it's something that we want to be able to do with some degree of accuracy, especially if we're dealing with specific evidence like blood spatter and things like that. It needs to be very precise. So if we were going to locate, for example, this marker for the board, and it's setting up on top of this desk right there, how would we locate that so that if somebody wanted to recreate this crime scene, they could do so? Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, you're going to find the most permanent places that you can to as reference points, right, for it. And so you can do what they call rectangular coordinates, and that's where we say we know that this room is somewhat square, and I say somewhat because the building is like 120, 30, 40 years old or something ridiculous, right? So these rooms probably aren't perfectly square, right? But they're within a level of square that you can recreate a point. You can locate a fixed point in this room if you measure the distance from this point to two fixed objects. So one would be that wall, and the other would be that wall, or that wall and that wall, whatever. Usually you want to try to pick the one that's going to be the shortest distance, but in reality it doesn't matter as long as it's two fixed points, and those points are as permanent as they can be. So would it do us a whole lot of good to say that this thing is this far away from this desk? Not really, because it's so easy to move that desk, right? You know, like whenever they did all that COVID stuff a few years ago, if you remember, they took seats out of the classrooms, you know, so that you wouldn't be tempted to be too close together and all that stuff. So you want to try to find the most permanent objects that you can to measure from. Now, could they do some kind of a massive gut job renovation of this room in the future? Yeah, but I mean, we do the best we can. Is the point that I'm getting at. Nothing is truly permanent because they could always, at some point in the future, tear this building down. Although they'd have to fight the government on that. It's on the historic register. But they did when they built the tech center. They tore down a building, you know, that was there before. So you know, it does happen sometimes. What if we're outside where they had convocation? What if somebody got killed at convocation and they had to do a crime scene thing? What's the most permanent thing that we could measure from if we were out on the quad?
Sidewalks, grass or the sidewalks. Like out there, but it's like basically square.
All right, what do you say?
Trees in the building.
Honestly, if we're talking about what's the most permanent, buildings. Buildings would be the most permanent. Trees and sidewalks are a pain in the ass to move or cut or whatever, but not as much as a building. So the building would be the most permanent structures that you have there, but it depends on where you're at. If you're in a rural stretch of a highway or something like that, trees might be all you have, or the roadway itself.
I would always love to do trees and some of them are like honorary trees like that names on them. So like they're not supposed to be.
Right.
Down. But I mean, no one knows what will happen in school closed or whatever.
Well, for the purposes of crime scene measuring and stuff like that, you just want to try to think about what's the most permanent kind of thing you can measure from. Not to say that it's bad to measure from a tree. If the tree is all you have, or if the building is so far away, but there's a big tree really close by, I mean, maybe you do use the tree. I'm just saying that, it gets more complex when your crime scene isn't easy. That being said, I'm not going to torture you guys and make you do this thing. There's ways to do things when you're outside. You can do what they call a baseline measure. So you could take if we were talking about where we were for convocation, you could basically take a straight line from the northwest corner of Malcolm and draw it to the southeast corner of Morrison, and you could have a straight line that would go there, and then you could measure off of that line at various points for your evidence. They call that the baseline. You could also do what they call triangulation. That's where instead of doing the baseline, you find those two fixed immovable points, and you find where the lines intersect. Recreating it would be kind of complex geography, but you could still do it, because there's only one place where those two lines would intersect at the correct measurements. So that being said, what we are going to do is what we call rectangular coordinates, and that's where you have a room, you have some kind of a structure, something that is relatively square, and so you've got two walls, and you're just going to measure 90 degrees to the wall and where those lines intersect.
Okay, so you know how it would be like if we did the wall and like the market signal thing. Take that and then
You try to do it 90 degrees. Understanding that this, measuring can be precise, but measuring with a tape measure is not going to be as precise as like if you literally wanted to get this perfect, you'd be taking like a laser line or something, and then doing it 90 degrees, perpendicular to the wall exactly and that kind of stuff. We're not probably going to be that precise, right? What we're probably going to do, is we're going to, take our tape measure, have, if we're good, we can do it without help. If we're not so good, then we would need somebody to help us, but we're going to take it out to the wall, and we're going to measure out, say, it'll be 9 foot, 18 inch, or this is the crap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 foot 9 inches. Or you could say 117 inches. I guess it's worthwhile having a brief discussion about how you measure in feet and inches. Nobody in here is international, but if you were, then you'd be like, what the hell is a foot and inch? You could get metric tape measures. In fact, this is like the cheapest Walmart special of a tape measure. What that means is that it's not quite as wide as like a nice Stanley tape measure. And so you only get so far out with this tape measure for, actually, this isn't that bad. consistent at all. That's why I said if you're good. If you're good, you can kind of get that out there to its extreme limit and then find a place to either hook it or rest it, you know, and then you can get the measurement by yourself. Otherwise, you're going to need a helper, somebody to stand over here and hold it and there. But something I just noticed too, as I just measured from here, but this is actually setting about 3 inches out from the wall. So actually, if I was going to be precise in my measuring, I would need to add 3 inches. Either add 3 inches to that measurement or measure it further out here, you know, for the width. So when you're using tape measures that are feet and inches, you have basically, if these marks represent like 1 inch, you're going to have a midway point. And that midway point is what? Halfway between 0 and 1 inch is a half an inch, yeah. So you got a half an inch. And then you got another point that's kind of midway between those 2 points, and that would be 1/4 of an inch, yeah. So what's half of that? An 8, and then half of that? 16. Usually on a tape measure, a 1/16 of an inch is the smallest measurement. If you get something kind of custom, you might be able to get a 32nd of an inch on that. When we're talking about like finished carpentry and stuff like that, they do make tape measures that'll give you 32nd of an inch, or hard like metal rulers, calipers and stuff. That'll give you 32nd of an inch, 64th of an inch. You know, and it gets really down. We're talking about when we're getting away from carpentry and into machining. You know, you can get very, very tight tolerances. So, but most tape measures go down to a 1/16 of an inch. So you got all these little tick marks, and if you measure, you know, if you do construction work or something like that a lot, you know, you get to a point where you kind of know what these marks mean. But if you don't, then you can start with half inch, and with 1/4 inch, okay, 1/8 inch, okay, 1/16 inch. You can kind of figure it out. Generally speaking, for most purposes that we are dealing with, as long as you're accurate within about 1/8 of an inch, probably good. You know, it doesn't have to be as precise as some things, but it also depends on what you measure. You try to do the best you can. They do make laser measuring devices where you can actually stand somewhere and push a button and it'll fire a laser back and give you a precise measurement. If you're going to use something like that, always verify that it's accurate before you start. Like measure something with your tape measure and then verify it with the laser just to make sure it's not messing up. But it makes it go a lot quicker because you can just stand here where you want it to be and go, boop, you know, and it'll usually have a little laser line, or you know, where you can see on the wall where it's pointing to. You just want to try to make sure that that's about as close to 90 degrees as you can get. And always go over here and look at where you're measuring to as well, because like I said, I just realized this is 3 inches out from the wall. So if you're measuring to here, you got to add 3 inches to it. Something else sneaky that you can do with a tape measure, even the cheap ones, will tell you right on the back of it how long this part of it is. The reason they do that is because if you're measuring where the end point of your measuring is at a wall, it saves you from having to do this kind of thing and kind of guesstimate it, where it's at. You can take the whole thing up against the wall, get your reading there, and then add, in this case, oh God, 3 and 11/30 seconds. Sorry, that's what happens when you buy cheap stuff. Most of your Stanley tapes are 3 inches. That's easy. So I wouldn't recommend doing that with this one. Does anybody actually have a tape measure like already somewhere? Because what I'd like to do is actually, you know, for your first assignment is have you guys do a sketch. I can have you guys measure the room this tape measure to do it. But if you have the option or you want to just go to Walmart and buy a cheap tape measure, I think it's better to measure something else, like, you know, whatever. Yeah, something. But I'll give you guys the option on which you would rather do. If you would rather get a measurement in this room, that's fine. If you would rather, you know, get your own tape measure and do it on your own time, that's fine. But I used to do where the sketch that you turn in would be all done all at once. There's so many kind of components to this that I think what I'm going to do is I want you guys to have a sketch of just a room with nothing in it other than like the major pieces of furniture. And then we will kind of add to that. And I'll kind of cover it the next time we're in class about what needs to happen with actual evidence in that room.
So you want to go ahead and like measure and draw out the room, just not the evidence and stuff.
Right. And bring a paper copy of that class next week. So sometime over the weekend, you know, and like I said, if you don't think you're going to have access to a tape measure or whatever, then you can use mine and you can measure this room and this will work too. What you want is you want to know the length and the width of the room. And it's probably a good idea to measure it on either side of it. Because like I said, if you're in an old building, it probably ain't square. But it's just a good habit to get into. Not that it matters that much on your sketch today, but you know, usually you want to measure it like here, and you want to measure it back there, just to kind of see how far out it is. You'd be surprised in some houses how bad it is. You know, I just sold a house that I remodeled, and I had to shim out one of the walls because the corner wasn't way out. And I was trying to put a band in the corner.
So you want us to measure the length and the width of the whole room or each wall?
Like,
Wall to wall? Okay.
yeah, like east to west, north to south, that kind of thing. So you measure it from here to there, you know, wall to wall, and then back here you measure again just to confirm that you got the same measurement. If it's off by like less than an inch, it's probably not. It's off by more than 90. You know, and then you'll measure this way at 2 points, just to kind of confirm your measurement. That also helps people from making a mistake. Like maybe this way you accidentally wrote it down wrong and you realize, you know, there's no way it's 5 inches longer or whatever, you know, and you realize, oh, I wrote that down. That kind of thing. If you have something complex like this, build out, right? We've got a room, you know, I find it easier to draw the big box first and then just take this out, you know, how long is it here, how long is it there, and then draw it inside of that. Same thing with something like this. That's why I don't like having you guys sketch this room. There's so much of this crap, especially if we were across the hall there. It has that little thing in the corner. You know, it's kind of complex. Once you've drawn the room, you do want to locate the major pieces of furniture. You know, the things that are, you know, like whenever I set the evidence down, it's set on the top of this desk, right? So, you know, you want to indicate where these things are. So in most houses, we're talking about what, like a dining room table and chairs, or a bed and a dresser, and, you know, like your living room furniture, couch and chairs. No, but unless, yeah, maybe if you find something that's under the rug, you would need to include the rug in your sketch, just that it's there. But it really just kind of depends on if the rug is relevant. If the rug is relevant, yeah, not.
So it's also like make sketches like after they want to.
On major crimes, you know, like they had that murder where they had like 2 crime scenes. I guarantee somebody had a now.
I would not want to, what is the job of that?
Is it the actual office?
Oh.
I mean, you know,
I didn't know if there was, like, yeah, like, I didn't know if there was a specific job that.
it's
someone
not
comes in
a
and does
super
it.
common thing.
I know
Most
that,
crime scenes you're not going to sketch, right? You show up and we're talking about like a domestic violence thing or something like that. You arrest the bad guy or whatever. You're not sketching that scene, you know. But if somebody's dead, you're gonna sketch that scene. Or if somebody's so seriously injured that you worry that they might die, yeah, you're gonna sketch that scene. Somebody is, anyway. And it's usually whoever draws the shortest straw or whoever actually likes doing that. Because believe it or not, there's people that are good at that
I
kind of
was
stuff.
I know they have like special people that come in and do like face drawings,
Yeah.
like when people.
Yeah,
what they look
this isn't
and
like
stuff
that. You
so-
usually don't have that level of specialized training for it because it's really just a supplement. It's something that can be entered into court, put up on a projector in court, because the jury, judge, the prosecutor, those people weren't there. And so, yeah, you can show them photographs, but it's also, you want something to kind of give you a bird's eye view of the whole thing, especially if it's complex, so. This is an example that comes out of your textbook where they have sketched the overall room, and you'll notice they're writing the measurements, kind of outside here, kind of draw a little line and you put like how wide it is from here to here, how wide it is from here to here, and that kind of stuff. And that's why I kind of want you to get that room part of it done first. Yeah. Yeah, it says figure 2.9, so somewhere in chapter 2 of the book is where this actual sketch is. But let me show you something else here too. Remember I said I talk about OJ a lot. All right. No, not the photos. I figured somebody would have an actual sketch of that. This is kind of not exactly what I'm talking about, but kind of sort of what I'm talking about. This is like the crime scene, a very juvenile looking rendition of the crime scene for the O.J. Simpson murder or the Nicole Simpson murder. This doesn't do a very good job because it doesn't show the steps. It doesn't really show measurements. It doesn't really show a lot of stuff, but it does give you, even just this rudimentary thing right here, it does give you kind of an idea of what we're talking about when taken in concert with the
875 is that the name of the?
that was the address. Yeah.
I was gonna say, or is that the address?
That is the address of Nicole's house where she was murdered with Ron Gold. Yes, and we'll talk about that, too. There is a legend that has to happen here where you're gonna, put certain information, what kind of an investigation it is, where it's at, that kind of stuff. Yeah. If you were in the criminal investigation class, we did this, but I did it as one big assignment.
Yeah.
And then people messed up in so many different ways on it.
Oh,
It was
I'm
hard.
sure I did.
It was hard to grade it because that's why I'm trying to do it more one step at a time now. Like draw the room first, let's make sure you've got which way is north on there because that needs to be on there too. That kind of thing. So, just in scouring the internet, I thought that would be easy to find. I've seen it before. This is a little bit better rendition because it shows the stairs. It doesn't show where the bodies were, but you pretty much are trying to kind of recreate an image of the crime scene that just kind of shows you the overall things. So that's actual photos. That shows the bloody footprint.
Was there two people in the murder?
Yes.
Of OJ's?
Do you mean two people that were murdered?
Yeah.
Yes. There was
I
a
don't know
guy.
a lot about that case.
What happened in that case is that there had been some kind of an issue between them because they like their kid had like a piano recital or a school thing or something, and they had seen each other there or something like that, and presumably he went to the house to, I guess, have some kind of an argument with her. Maybe he went there to kill her. I don't know, but she had gone out after that thing with her family, like her mom and sister and stuff like that, and they had gone to a restaurant. Somebody like left their glasses there. And here's a good thing. It's not a sketch, but it kind of gives you an indication. See, I mean, this is more of a 3D rendering, but that's actually him. But that's kind of where the first guy was found, and then she was kind of slumped over on those stairs. And then, but there was these stairs going up, and you could access it from the front through this gate or from the rear through another gate. And so it appears that the perpetrator came and went through that back gate. But what happened there, though, is that whomever, killed her, they were outside of her house, and this young man who worked at the restaurant just came to bring those glasses to her.
Oh, so he was just like.
Yeah, they did not know each other.
Crossfire.
Yeah, they did not know each other. He was just the guy, like, I guess he was getting off of work, and he's like, I'll drop it by there, because I guess somebody realized they left their glasses there, and so she contacted the restaurant, and the restaurant said, hey, we can bring them to you. And they sent this guy over there to bring it to her. And whomever it was that killed this person was waiting in, the dark area there. And I guess she came out and let this guy in to get her glasses back, and they got attacked. Mr. Goldman got attacked first, sliced his throat, and threw him down there next to the tree. And then the person spent more time on her. She was nearly decapitated. There was a little bit of contact left in the back of her neck, for her, severed her spinal. And then the person left through the back gate. And we know that because of the blood. This was a very bloody scene because both subjects were very deeply gashed in the neck, and there's arteries and stuff, that were arterial spray and everything else that was coming out there. So this person was covered in blood, and their feet and everything. And so that's basically the gist of what happened. But I was trying to find, because surely they had a sketch of it, but it's just hard to find. But maybe. Yeah, I have to do some more digging to find it, if I'm gonna find it. Nevertheless, what the expectation here is for your assignment, and this is something, like I said, you'll bring it to class and we're going to add to it. That's the purpose. Is that I want you to have the outline of a room, either a square room, a rectangular room, or some kind of a complex geometry room, doesn't much matter to me. On this sketch, you will indicate which way is north. So if we were gonna sketch this classroom, right, which way is north?
Hey Siri. Which way is north?
Ooh, let's see if that works.
It's either this one or this one.
Did it work? Does it actually tell them? I'm interested to know that actually. I never thought about
Yeah, north, south, east, west.
it. No, you need to indicate which way is north. It's from, if you know which way north is, you know which way the other.
Yeah.
It's always the same.
But do we have to label them on there? Or just
It's north.
I think we're facing south right now, or south. South. West. I think we're facing southwest right now, that's what I see on my maps.
North is this way. This is the north wall.
I only know
The
that
sun
'cause
is
I
rising
live
over
down
there.
in
That's east. That's east because the sun rises over that way and sets over there. So that's east to west, and that makes this north and that south. But it doesn't much matter how you figure it out, as long as you're accurate in which way is north, it's fine. You can also probably pull up like Google Maps or something. You know, like it'll probably, I don't know if it tells you which way is north. Whatever, but you need to know. So if this was the
Yeah, it
sketch,
does. It says I'm facing north right now.
yeah, on your phone,
Yeah.
like are you in a map app?
So like, yeah, when I click on this, they go to left, when I click this.
Oh, okay.
It like,
For you.
yeah,
I'm facing.
now I'm facing west. That makes sense.
So, and the reason that that's important is because remember too, when you're doing your measurements, right? Somebody's hopefully going to be helping you do your measurements too, because you know rooms are usually wide enough. If you don't have help, remember how I did this thing out here like this? An alternative way to do this when you don't have help is to go on the floor here and just kind of step on it. And go across like that. As long as you don't move the end of it when you're pulling up, you'll get an accurate measurement across the room. And you're wanting to go from wall to wall. So like if you come out in a space like this, you either need to get something 90 degrees, you know, something to, or you just need to eyeball it as best you can. You can go, you can measure just in inches, or you can measure with feet in inches, as long as you're consistent. Don't measure one thing with just inches and another one with feet. So like this tape measure sucks because it doesn't tell me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12 inches. So it's easier with this tape measure to just do inches. If you need to, you can do math, figure out divided by 12, and that's how many, and then whatever you would need. So like 100 inches is 8 foot, 1, 2, 3, 4 inches. When you take that measurement, we know that this is the north wall. So we know that this is an east to west measurement. So you'll want to put that in your notes when you write it down before you write your sketch when you're taking your measurements, that it's, what I say, 140 something east to west. And then same way the other way around. You'll take this measurement and that's north to south.
So you want us to say that?
In your notes. You'll draw it
Yeah.
and you'll say which way is north, but you're going to have to keep it straight in your head. Is the room wider this way or wider this way? Because that makes a difference in the sketch. So you'll need to know if you're measuring east to west or north to south whenever you're taking your measurements. Same way here, when you're measuring your evidence, you need to know that you're measuring from the east wall because you'll have to indicate that on your sketch. Otherwise, you'll get this in the wrong spot on your sketch if you do it the wrong wall. Like the east wall. So however far than it is the distance from the east wall to your evidence. And then from the north wall to your evidence. So you do, before you really begin this exercise, you kind of need to orient yourself with the cardinal directions, like north, south, east, and west, so that you don't get it mixed up on your sketch. Because right now, we're talking about that we took our measurements from this wall and this wall to locate evidence A. But then when we draw it on our sketch, we accidentally do this on the wrong side of the room. Measurements are the same, but this one's inaccurate because it's measured from the wrong wall. So that's why you kind of have to stay oriented when you're taking the measurements. You're going to have to take some notes when you take the measurements as to what those measurements are for and where they're measured from. So this is from east to west, north to south, from the east wall, from the west wall, from the south wall, from the north wall, so that you don't get it wrong on your sketch. Since you're measuring a room I haven't been in, I won't know if you messed that up, but it's good. It's something you have to think about. And it's one of the reasons this is always my first exercise in all of these kind of classes, because you know, people think detective work is TV, you know, sexy stuff, but it's a lot of this stuff. You know, go sketch this thing, you know, get some measurements, you know, collect this evidence, look over this person's bank records, you know, and find the anomaly, find the smoking gun in there, kind of thing. And so it's tedious and time consuming work sometimes. So I want you to do that. And when you're drawing your sketch, I want you to indicate, like, right, your east to west measurement is going to go kind of up here. And you're going to say 149 or whatever. And then your other measurement is going to be kind of out here. And you're going to say that that's, you know, 138. If you have something built out into the room like this, you know, you're going to indicate that there, and you're going to put a measurement on it. You know, 45. Let's say 60. You know, whatever the accurate measurement is, and you need to kind of know that. And then later on, when you start measuring your evidence, you'll be putting the measurements on that too. But like I said, right now, just get the room. And right now, the major pieces of furniture in this room would be the desks and this podium. So I can measure and locate those. However, if it's not something that is super relevant to your investigation, you don't necessarily have to be super precise in drawing it. You know what I mean? So, you know, but we want to kind of be generally okay. So like, for example, there may be a fair amount of evidence on top of this desk, you know, maybe. And so we'd want to draw it very accurately. But if there's nothing really going on over here, then we can just indicate that's a podium. Yeah.
Well, that's to do like the windows and stuff too. Like we did that last semester, but I didn't know it's a different separate.
Yeah. Doors and windows are the next kind of thing to talk about. Generally, how those are indicated, we kind of take a cue to some extent, maybe from architectural drawings and what they do in there when we're doing these kind of sketches. And so how they typically will do that is they'll draw a little box basically on the wall where these things are located. And so like in this room, the windows are on the east wall, right? So that's north, this is east. And so what we would do is just draw a little, kind of a little rectangle on the wall here to show that that's a window. And, you know, there are two windows kind of side by side there, and then another two windows there. But the other thing in this room is we have a door. We have two
How would you
doors.
do the door? Because it's like some measure.
No, here's the thing, and that is a good question. Is there evidence? If there is, then yes, the thickness of the wall makes a difference. And so you'll have to kind of indicate that in your sketch. You'll have to kind of draw it out a little bit, like that this is kind of a, like the room has a little cutout, you know, where it goes outward. If there's no evidence here, probably doesn't matter. But yeah, there could be. This is the entrance to the room, so if there's a blood stain out there, then yeah, you know, and this is significant. This is like 9 or 10.
I was about to say, because it's so big.
Yeah.
It's wide.
Holy cow. It is 14 inches deep.
Yeah.
So,
I have mine at home.
so yeah, I mean,
Thick, but
the most truly accurate way to measure that would be, yeah, to make it like the whole room is just built out that way, you know? But if there's not evidence there, it probably won't happen. Really just depends. But how you would do a door is the same way. You're gonna kind of draw your little box, you know, however wide that the thing is generally, and then you're gonna indicate the swing, right? So doors can be right hand or left hand, in swing or out swing. So this is an out swing door, meaning that it doesn't open into the room, outside the room. And so you would indicate that on your sketch, and the hinges are on the left, and you're looking at it from the inside. So that would mean on this side of the door, and it's going to swing out like that. That indicates that that's a door and not a window, right there. And then besides the handle on that, like same side. So on the other side of the room, you'd indicate that there's another door there, and you would indicate that it opens outward like that. So you generally just kind of rough locate your desk here, indicate the measurements like that and like that. And then if you were sketching this room, it would suck because you would have to draw these individual desks. But mostly what you're probably going to be sketching is just going to have like a couch, chair, table and chair, desk, you know, it's not going to be like a stupid amount of furniture like this room is, you know, so. But you want to give an indication of where the furniture is, mainly just because it helps people to kind of understand what might be possible in the room. So like if we had this room all cleared out, we could do defensive tactics in here, right? But we can't because we got all this stuff in the way, right? You know, we'd have to move the desks all around in order for that to be possible. So it kind of gives people an indication about what the room is for and things like that. So you'll notice in this sketch, they have a chair, they have a table, they have a couch. And they've located these things, but they're not super precise about, like, they're not really saying on there how big the chair is or anything like that. They're just kind of locating them in the room. Kind of the last thing to talk about really with respect to this is the title block that I want you to have on here. Which I'm not sure if there's a slide for that, but you know what? It should be. Okay, well, what you need to have on your sketch for a crime scene is going to be the case number, which obviously in this case is going to be something you just make up. Usually it starts with the year, and then it's whatever number of call for service you're on for that year. So, you know, depending on what kind of agency you work for, the number can be very small or very large. When we were like at Cole County, we just used the dispatch number. So that meant that it was not how many calls for service have we, or not how many calls for service have we had to needed a report, but just the total volume of calls for service. So that number got big really fast. But like the agency I work for now, they only assign case numbers when you write a report. So like if you go out and it's an unbounded call or you handle it, it doesn't need a report, that kind of thing, that doesn't get a report. But you know, so 2022-001538, whatever the hell numbers you want to make up. So case number, date, the offense that's being investigated. So for the date, obviously the date that you sketch it. The offense, but in real life, it's the date of the offense. The offense, we're just going to say death investigation because that's the most frequent kind of a thing that's going to need it's kind of a sketch. And notice I said death and not homicide because we don't want to necessarily jump to conclusions before we completed the investigation, even if it's pretty obvious the person was murdered. We're going to still call it a death investigation until we concluded, you know, that somebody actually did this. So location, that's going to be the address. So if we were sketching this room, it would be, you know, 500 East College, Beatty Hall, because Beatty Hall doesn't have a specific address. It's on the campus of Missouri Valley College. So what's that?
Just put like 500 East College Street, that hall.
Yeah.
Hall.
Right, yeah.
So that's where the-
Yeah, so you start with the address.
You have to put like Marshall or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, but what you would do after that, like 500 East College, there would be like a second line in the address. Like if you're going to have something shipped here, right? You would have them put on the second line, like whatever, wherever it's going. So if it's an address with multiple buildings, you're going to name the building as well. The next thing you need on there is what we call scene. Where is it at in this building? You know, where is it at in this house? We're talking about the living room, or we're talking about the dining room, or we're talking about the kitchen. You know, if we have something where the whole house is a crime scene, what is this sketch? Are you trying to sketch the whole house in one thing? Probably not. You're probably going to take individual rooms. So this sketch is going to be of the bedroom. This sketch is going to be of the living room. This sketch is going to be of the dining room. See what I mean?
Yeah.
And you might even include an additional one that's everything, but damn, that would be hard. You know, sketch a whole house. But, you know, so we'll say master bedroom. So case number, date, offense, location, and scene. You also need a sketch by in your name so that you can take ownership of it. If there's any testimony that needs to take place about this, you're the one to do it. And then obviously, remember I said also you need to indicate which way is north, and that's going to be all for now. There will be a legend where you'll identify your evidence. When you put your evidence on the sketch, you're going to, you know, give it a unique identifier, kind of like exhibit A, exhibit B, that kind of thing. So you're going to have evidence A, evidence B, and You can get all the way into double A, flip them double B, double C. You know, it just depends on how much evidence you have, how big your scene is. But that's how it generally goes. So what's got to be on there for the just the room itself is this information. They call it the title block. Oh, I forgot. It's not just date and time of the events. Sorry. And for the purposes of the assignment, just whatever time you do the sketch, note the time, write it down. That being said, that's all I got for today. When we get back in class next week, I will probably take you guys over to the crime lab and just kind of make sure everybody kind of knows where it is, and then talk about some stuff over there. I will probably do that towards the end of class, just so that I can just release you from there instead of having to walk all the way over there, walk all the way back. But that's part of the plan, and we'll figure out what evidence we want to have in our scenes as well. And I'll take a look at what you have.
That works.
Yep. Have a good weekend.
You too.